Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Two Blokes podcast. Today, Dead Duck and I are just going to sit back and talk about whatever is on our minds. So pull up a stump and join us. And Dead, how you doing today?
I'm all right. I'm all right. Normal Sunday evening for me, thinking about work for the next 5 days and all that normal sort of bump. So yeah, just normal Sunday, I guess. What about yourself?
Well, I'm having a normal Sunday afternoon. Um, got a couple of errands to run, but I am on vacation this coming
Ooh,
week. So I know. And I have a whole bunch of very pleasant activities lined up that that are my version of pleasant activities.
mm,
That might not be the same as everyone else's, but it's stuff I like to do.
yeah,
And you know, yeah, I'm looking forward to just the rest,
yeah,
the break from work, and kind of get my head squared away. I think that's why I was ready to agree when you said maybe we could just have a free flowing conversation. So
yeah,
it's like my thinking, has been focused on just particular things so much. I'm kind of sick of thinking about it,
yeah,
and I'm it's the banging one's head against the wall feeling,
yeah,
you know. And I always tell people that uh, I do it not because I'm just wanting to be a good guy. I kind of do it because I have to. But
mm,
even with that, I get sick of it. I get sick. Like before we started the podcast, we were talking about the Piers Morgan interview with Pearl and Ava.
mm,
And like I say, now, whenever I see that, I just look at it and I'm like, you know, I blame all three of you for this.
yeah,
you know, and I don't like any of it, and,
mm,
and uh, I know too many other people will feel the opposite way when they watch it.
mm,
Too many people will really be digging it,
yeah,
and they're digging it. They keep buying it because y'all keep selling it.
yeah,
You know, so
yeah,
like I say that it it gives me I get too grumpy, about it,
mm,
and it's not. I mean, it's not wise for me to be grumpy to begin with, but
yeah,
it's ineffective.
yeah,
People tell me that they can tell when I'm out of sorts and you know and grumpy,
yeah,
and it's harder to take me seriously, I guess, you know um because I'm taking myself too seriously.
mm,
And I'm like, yeah, that's a point. I mean, I don't like it when other people do that, so no
mm,
reason to
mm,
expect they put up with it from me.
yeah.
So what are you brewing for this week?
I'm tomorrow. I've got to go to a place called Avonmouth with a new starter at the company.
Hmm.
Teach him a few little tricks.
Hmm.
Just doing 3 runs about 30 miles away and back for the day, and then
Hmm.
I'm going to drop him back up the yard. Have a nice early night, unless I get told, "Can you go up north to pick up Tuesday morning?" And then I'm probably going to be back on the prison cells on well, for the rest
Yeah,
of the week.
hauling them.
Yes, I will send you a WhatsApp. Okay, because obviously we
Okay.
have each other's contact information.
Hmm.
The beauty of doing these kind of podcasts, folks, if you get on well with your co-host, you get their phone number. You can send them random stuff online.
And he does. Just it is
Yes.
random stuff.
So there's that one. That's my old girl with two of them on, and I'll send you that one, which is them on the ground around the high ab crane. So yeah, they're actually
Yeah.
20 foot by 8 foot prison cells.
Okay.
What the British Department of Justice has decided to do is we're not going to build more permanent prisons. We're going to use these prefabricated temporary buildings instead.
Yeah.
It's cheaper to haul them in. Well, I say it's cheaper.
Mhm.
um,
Yeah. Yeah.
the the high ab driver, so the guy operating the crane that's in the second picture,
Hmm.
and the guy who's taking them inside the prison. Because if you look at the first photograph, you can actually see the outer wall of the prison
Yeah.
site.
The
So
facility. Yeah.
yeah, we weren't actually going within because we couldn't get underneath
Hmm.
um, the gate or get through the
Hmm.
gates. We're too tall. So yeah, to have those two on site all week is over £5,000 per day for
Huh.
the company that we're doing the job for. Plus, obviously, having me haul them 130 miles
Yeah.
from the British West Midlands all the way down, you know,
Yeah.
the southwest countryside.
Right. Right. And plus, of course, manufacture and
Yeah,
distribution costs and,
yeah,
all it's probably it doesn't really matter where you are
hmm
or how you do it. It's just not cheap to incarcerate people. It's
no, it's not.
it's just not cheap, you know.
But the idea behind these is these are the guys and girls that are sort of at the end of their sentences. They've behaved themselves, done well for
Right.
themselves inside, and it's like, well, have this nice little area
Hmm.
for yourselves, and if you show that you can look after this, then you're going to be okay. I
Right.
was, obviously people stop when they're working on site, they hear stories, and then you go talk to them when you're there waiting or what have you. So you get to hear the stories as well. I mean, there was a case, there's one story of a guy who was working off site. He was in prison, but he was working off site. So he'd go out at 8 o'clock in the morning in a car and then come back by 5 o'clock in the afternoon, having done a full day's work.
Yeah.
I mean that's an awful lot of trust in someone. Um,
Yeah.
and all these sorts of stories. So yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that's what I've been doing last week. That's what I'm going to be doing for the next week.
Right.
And I think rumor is it's going to be a good few weeks of it. So
Wow.
you
Yeah.
know,
Maybe,
I
it's like when I hear that, part of me thinks, well, that's probably a good thing, if they can pull it off, right?
yeah,
Because, the thing is, you want to end up with stories where you got a guy, finishing out his sentence and he's actually, doing what you and I do routinely, which is
mm,
go do a job and then come back home, you know like
yeah,
it's like you want people that ended up behind bars to be able to get to the place where, like, they don't need somebody telling them where to squat and lean all day. They just
yeah,
they do their own stuff all on, like, grown-ups, all by themselves, right?
yeah,
And whenever I hear about that, I'm like, we don't even, here in the good old US of A, we don't even talk that way anymore. We've allowed ourselves to be conditioned that those who end up in prison are just condemned to do their time there, leave, be doing exactly what got them there in the first place, and then they go right back.
yeah,
And the good news is we pick up the check, right?
yeah.
As
I think
and it's like, uh full end-to-end expense for an Ivy League education does not cost as much as it costs to keep somebody, incarcerated in a,
mm,
a tighter, medium, up to maximum security prison. And the
yeah,
super maxes, I hate to tell you what they cost.
yeah.
I mean,
I'd
that
hate to.
that's yeah, it's ugly, you know.
Yeah,
But we pay, right?
yeah. See, I don't even think we've got prisons like supermaxes. I'm wondering if that's a cultural difference. behind that.
I think most Western countries don't,
Mm,
because again, they're still holding on to, at least the shred of hope that however the incarcerated person starts out their prison career, it will end up with them not repeating it.
yeah, I
Where
know.
here it's like you know, we put people in places like that, because like I say, the supermaxes are only for people that have already been incarcerated in, a regular medium or max security prison
Yeah,
and were, unhousable. They were just too bad, you know.
yeah,
And then they send them to, these Erewhon places where, they like finish training them to stop being human altogether.
yeah,
And it's like, well, looks like you want to make sure that you keep them there either until they pass away or until they're too old to do anything.
yeah. Do you have open prisons in the States?
I'm not familiar with the term. It might be something similar to like a minimum security work release type facility.
Yeah, so open basically doesn't have walls and gates, essentially.
Hmm.
The, the inmates are still in prison,
Hmm.
but they're free to walk around. See, the first time I did these things was a place called Ipswich, which is across the
Hmm.
other side of the country from where we are,
Hmm.
and it was in an open prison.
Okay.
So you drive down the road, and all of a sudden you're in the prison grounds. But there's no gates. There's only a couple of signs up that tells you you're almost there, sort of effort.
Right.
And some of the inmates are even sort of working with us and the construction companies on site and what have you. So because it was quite a tight area that we had to go into, they would like be traffic marshalling for us. So as we're coming round a corner, for example,
Hmm.
um, obviously I'm assuming you've seen how a semi up works.
Yeah.
If you're stood, you don't want to be stood at the trailer end. Let's put it
Right.
that way,
Right.
because that's the bit that's going to squish you. So what they
Hmm.
would do is they'd stop everyone else from coming through so that we could go around the corner, and then they let everyone through. Like, so they were doing stuff like that, but also on a wall just outside of the on or at the border of the prison grounds, it is literally no inmates beyond this point.
Hmm.
Now, obviously, these guys, because it was an all male prison,
Hmm.
are not going to risk napping that up for themselves.
Right.
It's literally the last restriction of their freedoms before they're let out.
Yeah.
And if they can show that they can be trusted to not go beyond that sign, essentially,
Right.
then they're going to be released on time with no restrictions and everything else.
Right.
So, I think that's sort of a more liberal, I suppose, not necessarily in the American sense of liberal, a
No.
more liberal view on
Yeah.
dealing with the incarcerated
Right.
that you maybe don't see in the States. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, uh, the, I guess, social contract over there includes this idea that, like I say, if someone, messes up badly enough that they end up incarcerated,
Mm,
the whole plan is like, look, prisoner, now you're here and you are our problem,
mm,
and we don't want you to be a problem,
mm.
so not we have to, you have to, like learn how to go be out there again and not repeat the same performance that got you here.
Yeah,
We'll do whatever we can to help you with that. But, I mean, they make it clear we don't want you back,
yeah,
right? We don't want you, we didn't want you here to begin with,
yeah,
but since you're here, you know, we want you to leave. You're not
Yeah.
welcome, But here, I mean, in America, the way we have it set up now, the people running the prisons love having lots and lots and lots of prisoners, as many and as often and as long as possible, and I'm like, well, you you guys
Unfortunately,
you
it's
guys
because
love them.
yeah, it's because I think most prisons over there are privately owned, aren't they? They're not because with
um
prisons over here, it's HMP,
right,
which is His or Her Majesty's Prison,
right.
and
Yeah, it's
you
an
know,
organ, it's an organ of the crown, of the state.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
here it's, well, you can't say that they're, that they are private enterprise exactly. But they're, the construction and maintenance and management and I guess how you would say workflow is all contracted out,
yeah,
to people that, quite honestly, like I said, the they're the oversight of, their effectiveness is strictly on paper,
yeah,
and nobody really honestly looks and says, hey, you seem to have lots and lots of prisoners, and a great many of them have been with you before, more than once. you
mm,
know it looks like, you guys are running a really like cheesy hotel service, you know and
yeah,
the problem is, again, these are private contractors, but they're paid by, you know the public trust. I mean, tax revenue
mm,
is how those contracts are funded, right? And it's with the promise to the taxpayers that, they're, yes, they are, housing the incarcerated, but they're working to try to get at least some of them not to come back,
yeah,
right? And like I say, that discussion isn't even really being had. you know
mm,
it's a perfect capitalist setup. I mean, the more of them that you get, the bigger the budget for next year has to be, because when they come back, and they will, they're going to be that much more difficult to house, right? And it's like, for the people making money on this, it's a perfect system.
yeah,
It really is. But for the incarcerated who don't want to come back, the whole situation is unworkable for them. you know and for the people, because there's a lot of people incarcerated very happy where they're at. They have their life set up the way they want it.
yeah,
So they don't want to leave, and when it's time for them to leave, they do what they got to do to either function the same way on the outside or get back in, the sooner the better.
yeah,
you yeah, way back during the Trump administration, you probably would occasionally hear about MS-13, which is uh, a South American gang. you know
mm,
um and it started out, or it rose to prominence mostly in the western and southwest United States, under the moniker La M, or yeah, the M.
mm,
Um, and it was a prison gang, in
yeah,
places like Chino, and it's like LA County Jail.
mm,
Um, and it's like they set up shop there. It was,
yeah,
that was their industry and their careers. It's just, it wasn't legal, right?
mm,
But just like the organized crime that flourished under prohibition, you
mm,
know, um, there was a market that was, arguably illicit, that was, driven underground and allowed to just explode because of the fact that, the kind of people who were willing to do that, were the kind of people that did not fear things like police, courts, and prison.
Mm.
You know, and to this day they don't. And it's like, so, like I said, over here, that's why the attitude isn't, yes, you are here, in prison. We don't want you here. We hope you don't want to be here. And we're going to help you, be here as short as possible, get the
Mm.
hell out and never come back.
Yeah.
And over here, it's not like that. Everybody
Yeah.
just shrugs and says, well, it's really too bad, but I guess that's just the way things are,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I
Um,
tell you what, one conversation we probably should do is obviously a couple of weeks ago we did the podcast on America where we thought
yeah.
problems were, what solutions we thought might be applicable.
Mhm.
And we could have done this probably as a whole podcast on its own, but do you want to, I suppose, return fire and sort of
Well,
have a
yeah.
suggestion of problems we got in the UK and
Um,
back that one back and forward for a bit?
yeah,
It's not a
because,
it's not a big
I,
conversation, is it? But it's fun.
well, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's not earth shattering and it isn't really, dire, but
Mm.
I suppose, it's worthy of the time
Mm.
to give people a chance to kind of see where we're at, really,
Yeah.
and that we can frame our thinking outside of, just like men's issues.
Mm.
Because, and, the criticisms of, the United Kingdom kind of really, uh, they dovetail with that
Mm.
because, um, a while back, I don't remember exactly how long ago, but it's been, some months. I don't know if you keep up with a YouTube channel called Philosophy Tube.
No, I
That's
don't.
it's hosted by, um, well, at least their online name is Abigail Thorne.
Hmm.
Now, Abigail started out her podcast when she had been Oliver Thorne.
Right.
But, in the course of transitioning, she had to contend with, you guys publicly supported and publicly run healthcare system.
Hmm.
And she was very quick to point out that, it really is, part of the universal health care that you all enjoy over there.
Hmm.
However, you know, and it's always a however, right? That, it's a fairly elegant and, elegant meaning, simple and effective, and very popular healthcare system.
Hmm.
But, she said that the people that, she was trying to get to help her, you know, with the medicine around transitioning, what they all said to her is, this is a great system. The problem is that it's run by the British government, you know.
Yeah.
And I guess like that's the, after hearing that and after hearing a lot of the plight of, um, like ordinary uh working class and I suppose, moderate to lower middle class men, is that, you know even an extraordinary example like that, I mean, at one point in the past, Abigail was male,
Mm.
right? And when Abigail was male, another thing that she put out there as him, was the abusive relationship that he had been in,
Mm-hmm.
earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, with his partner who was a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like during that time and in that video, the discussion was his invisibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this was right around the same time, I think, that there were a lot of complaints about the lack of real voice and real regard, for just men in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
um but the thing that I also noticed was that you know a lot of women had been, and I'm thinking probably still do, get they do get a lot of regard and they do get a lot of attention, just doesn't really help,
Mm.
you know. And they all, it's like because you are more, the UK is more socialist than, America. Everybody blames the government, right? Everyone says, this is a policy issue, or this is
Yeah.
a lack of, funding into the, whatever part of the public trust they seem to think is, deficient.
Mm.
And this is the kind of thing, it's like death by a thousand little cuts, right?
Mm.
No one of these things is worth, just like marching in the streets and rioting about. They really aren't, you know.
Mm.
And I think that's why a lot of the time, the people you all in the UK, you don't, like, you guys don't have respect for, and you don't, um I guess, have any patience for that kind of activism.
Mm.
And I really, me, I really relate to that, because I don't have any, regard or patience for that kind of activism either, you
Mm.
know. But it's like there's this uneasy equilibrium between the British government and the British people, that once in a while gets a little rupture in it, you
Mm.
know. But the good thing about how you all do it is that, eventually it does seem to work, right?
Yeah.
You know, the downside is that, it's at the cost of, like I say, the individuality, and the individual issues of a lot of people in general.
Mm.
The easiest example is men. you know
Mm.
it's like you guys have to wait at the back of the bus. You're not kicked off, right? But sit down and shut up.
Yeah.
And it's not that, I can't see how that happens, because like I say, once you hand responsibility over, for something over to a bureaucracy, they're you're basically, uh like you're giving them a risk, of uh rocking the boat, that they have no incentive to take,
Yeah.
you know. And this going back to the philosophy tube video of Abigail transitioning and becoming Abigail, was, there, what happens instead is the bureaucrats become very creative and very clever in managing their risk.
Mm.
you know um they have all these little, tricks and traps, right?
Mm.
And over here in the good old US of A, it's not like we don't have any bureaucracy, because we certainly do,
Mm-hmm.
and it suffers the same limitations.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of becoming adept and efficient at what they are burdened with, what happens instead is they become really proficient and really genius, at mitigating their risks, and um, always being able to make a case for a bigger budget next year.
Mm.
And like I say, I see a lot of that same kind of thing in Canada, in the United Kingdom, in the rest of the Commonwealth, um, because like I said, that is not a magic bullet.
Mm.
Creating a policy structure and a bureaucracy, and an authority doesn't magically make human problems go away. I wish it did, because I
Yeah.
think with the kind of budgets over here that we have for our bureaucracies, our lives would all be perfect.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
but it just doesn't play out that way. And then the legitimacy of whatever bureaucracy that is gets called into question, right?
Mm.
And because we're so uh you know our special interest groups are such bullies to our elected officials,
Mm.
the bureaucracy and public policy, you know, that's like the next big thing and the flavor of the month, 4 years later, it's like nobody even remembers what it was,
Yeah.
right? And like I said, either way, the money, ironically, the money always gets spent. Over
Mm.
there where you are, the one thing I think you can agree on is that, they take their end off the top, right?
Mm-hmm.
They get paid. Um, and it's like a casino. I mean, sometimes, win and sometimes you lose,
Yeah.
right? And it's mostly, like I said, just because you guys put a lot of faith, in a system that, it's more difficult to get it to be, responsive and nimble,
Mm.
just because of the fact that it belongs to everybody.
Mm.
It's not a private enterprise. It's not a privately owned organ. It's just
Mm.
it's like your prison system. It belongs to Charlie, right?
Mm.
It's his problem, and
Yeah.
if he does a good job, then it'll be okay, right? Or he will try to make sure it's okay. If he doesn't, then you know say it could end up 10 years from now, your prison system could end up looking like ours.
God. Yeah.
So I guess, like I said, that's the beef. Is, while over here, we have runaway bureaucracy, but we also have runaway private enterprise,
Mm.
right? And in both respects, it's it's not in hand. I mean, it's not really manageable, you know. But and that's why a lot of the things we talked about, the other week, have been happening. But over there where you're at, there is uh, a single point of failure, really, uh, which is, say, the government, the prime minister and the ministries,
Mm-hmm.
the housing council and the prison system and your education system. Like I say, it's these are all vulnerable to, like, one entity mishandling it. There's no competition, nobody else to step in and say I can do it better.
Yeah.
There is nobody to step in and say I can do it better. you
Yeah.
know um And like I say, it comes with its own set of problems, but they're harder to discern. It's harder to pinpoint the bad guy because it's kind of everybody, you know. And like I said, for some things, my opinion, it would be wiser. Like even if I was your current monarch, right? I would just come to the people and say, you know what? We've done the best we can with this, right? And there's some of it we're doing really well with, but the rest of it we're gonna take a hard second look, because it's just not working out.
Yeah, the thing with King Charles, he doesn't actually have any real political power. He's
Mm,
also he doesn't. He's also forbidden from having or expressing a political point of view, which is why.
I I know. I'm not
Uh,
saying, it's like strictly speaking, if he's not going to do that, but if he did, strictly speaking, he would be out of line. I mean, that's, as
mhm,
you say, he's supposedly forbidden to do a lot of things,
mhm.
but like I said, I'd be willing to bet that if he just went ahead and did it anyway, sort of like unplanned and unannounced, it's like, what could they do? So what are you gonna do? Fire me?
um,
What-
he'd end up like the last king who tried that trick.
Well, yeah. And
Then,
I'd be like, if I were him, I'd be like, go ahead. You know, well,
um,
it's just, I might be the last monarch of I might be the last crown of Britain anyway. So, go ahead, do what you're going to do.
yeah, I mean, we thing is, we tried that one with Cromwell. It didn't go well.
No,
That's why we had the dissolution of the monarchy. It didn't go well, so we reinstated the monarchy. And there's this big misconception about how the monarchy works in the UK. It is a constitutional monarchy. It has no real power, which is why it's a figurehead at the end of the
right.
day.
It's very restricted, and
Mhm.
it's largely symbolic head of state, you
Yeah,
know. But
yeah,
like I said, that, that affords, like I said, it affords kind of a lot of soft power, as long as you're not looking to perpetuate it. Like Cromwell and all of that, and yeah, it was really, for that time period, you didn't have a monarchy, but you failed at it. I would say if the same thing were to happen again, the results might be a pleasant surprise, right? But again, this now we're in speculation land because King Charles is not going to do that. He's going to be the king. But
yeah.
if
Um,
me, I'm kind of a like stick in the mud anyway. I'd be like, I if you guys are going to be that way with me, uh, I'll abdicate. You know, I'll quit. Now
mm,
what? You know,
yeah.
I would. I'd be like, you
Well,
guys,
to
you
be honest,
guys
if
are acting like you want me to quit, and I'll do it.
thing
You
is, if
know?
he did, his son would take over, which is essentially
Oh,
what the
oh
British
yeah,
people.
yeah. I'd be like, yeah, you know what? I will abdicate, and then my son will take over. Now what?
That, to be honest with you, that's what the British people want. People are fairly
Yeah,
apathetic
I
about.
think I think the British people want it, but I think the real powers that be, at least at this point, really don't.
Yeah. Um, I know people who have worked with Prince William, and he is not to be underestimated. He's a tough individual, is that boy? And it would be the first time that a reigning monarch has abdicated in this country. It happened,
Yeah,
pre Second World War was the
yeah,
last time that one happened, and that was
yeah.
because he wanted to marry an American woman.
Right.
And so the crown went to his brother, and then it went to his daughter,
Mm-hmm.
who was, I think, if you ask most British people, she was probably the best thing that ever happened to this country. In fact, I would suggest. Elizabeth II was probably the best thing to happen to the free world.
Yeah, over time, I
Be-
mean, her record's pretty spotless and pretty, uh,
mm,
like innovative and nimble.
yeah,
Like in her heyday, um, it was, you guys were running like a Swiss watch.
mm,
There was nothing wrong with Great Britain during that time. You guys were, but again, and a lot of that is a matter of the timing of it. It was when that abdication took place. It was things were pretty like intense anyway, right? And something had to be done, but you are really not so much in that position anymore. That the heat is kind of off, and I think like
I think
what if Charles were to abdicate and William were to say, I will ascend to the throne, but you know, kind of like only on my terms. Otherwise I won't do it.
it would then go to who would it go to? Thankfully, it wouldn't go to Harry.
Um, I no, Harry is William's brother.
Yeah, but he's further on down the line.
Well, who
Be-
before him?
I think it would go to George, Prince George, William's son, and then it would go to
How
Charlotte.
how old is George?
I don't even believe he's 10 yet.
Well, then there'd be a regent.
Yeah. But Harry is in no position to ascend to anything, and
No, he really isn't.
he's washed his hands
I
with the
mean,
whole thing anyway.
yeah. I mean,
In
as far as being an effective monarch, yeah. I mean, it's like that would be terrible for him and everyone else. But
Mhm.
um, I didn't know that they could just skip him, but I guess they can.
It's not being skipped. He's just been pushed down the line.
Well,
He would.
how is that decision even made? I mean, how does that's you guys' system of monarchy is very arcane.
Mhm.
I it really is.
because because William was the firstborn.
Mhm.
Any of his children would then come in line before Harry, because Harry was the second born.
Oh, okay.
Basically, what Harry would have to do if he wanted to be king was take out his brother, take out his nieces and nephews, and then he could ascend.
Oh, wow. Well, I
You
hope he
know,
doesn't do that.
yeah, but that we're going back to some 1600 shit right there.
Yeah. And the way he behaves, he doesn't seem to have any aspirations to be the king.
No, he's more Meghan Markle's pack horse really,
Yeah.
and it's a shame because aside from a couple of questionable decisions, shall we say, that he's made
Hmm.
in his life before the whole Meghan Markle thing, and there's this belief that we all hate Meghan Markle in the UK because she's biracial, what have you. No, we just hate her because of what she's done with Harry.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's the individual. It's got nothing to do with her demographics. She's just, you know, not a
Mm.
very good person.
Thoroughly unpleasant, I think, is the best way to put
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And she, her and his marriage has taken a man who was very much devoted to his duty.
Hmm. Yep.
There's a video of him when he was based out in Afghanistan. We had a media blackout for his protection,
Right.
um, and it was released when he returned home. But he's giving an interview, and he was a gunner on the Apache, on
Hmm.
British Apaches. A
Hmm.
shout went out for a rescue mission.
Hmm.
He could not get the microphone off of him and get to the aircraft quick enough.
Yeah.
And that's the Harry that we all remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the Harry we all want. I mean,
Back.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he and his brother together would make a formidable team on the world stage. And with Catherine in particular in the background, because Catherine's been fantastic with both brothers.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, she's loyal and supportive of everything of William, and she showed her class when she and William actually split up for a brief time. She kept her mouth shut. didn't say anything bad, and kept her nose clean. So, I mean, William eventually saw the error of his ways and
Right.
sort of asked for Catherine to come back.
Right.
And ever since that moment, she's the queen in waiting. There's no
Yeah.
doubt about it. Catherine is a queen in waiting, and she'd make a fantastic job of it as well. It's a general consensus.
Yeah.
She'll be brilliant for the country as a whole.
I agree. Again, this is, uh, contingent on the continuation of the monarchy.
I
Um,
there's no mass hunger for the abolition of the monarchy.
I know.
Even
Um,
countries such as Australia and New Zealand, when they've been given the opportunity, they voted to stay with the Queen as head of the
yeah,
British
the
monarchy as head
common.
of state.
Yeah.
If some Commonwealth countries don't recognise the British monarchy as head of state, it's more of a we'll look after you and you
Mhm.
look after us kind of thing.
Right.
So, and there have been some Commonwealth nations that have seceded and gone away from the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not a thing of you have to be a part of it. It's your choice at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's like having the UK or being a UK protectorate. So,
Basically. Yeah.
yeah, places like the Isle of Man, for example, they don't recognise the British government. They have their own.
Right.
It's a little tiny island in the Irish Sea,
Yeah.
but they fall under our protection.
Right.
So, you mess with the Isle of Man at your peril. Apart from
Right.
anything else,
It's
you'll piss off about 50,000 bikers a year. That's not a
right.
good thing.
No.
Um,
No.
so, there's no, even in some countries where they've had referendum on whether or not they become a full-on republic, they voted to keep the monarchy as a head of state. So there isn't a mass desire to get rid of the monarchy. There are obviously groups that do want to do that.
Uh,
Um, and I,
like I wouldn't be, you know, I mean, I'm over here, so,
mm,
but if I were there, you know, if I were a citizen and subject, right, I'd be the same way. I'd be like, I don't want, you know, it's like I would say I don't want to get rid of this headship of state because, you know, because mostly because you don't have a workable replacement for it. Um, we're and again, this kind of goes back to Cromwell. We are a constitutional monarchy because, you know, we tried it without the monarchy, it just didn't work. And uh, but at the same time, like I said, I've lived my whole life, without an hereditary head of state, and so like I know it can be done, but that it like if you all are not going to do it, right? If you're not going to do without a monarchy as your head of state, that like I said, and if I were that crown, if I was Charles, you know, I would say, look, I'm not supposed to have a political opinion, but here's my political opinion. That this is we're at a delicate time right now. We're in the middle of divesting from the European Union, right? And reclaiming our sovereignty, right? And uh, we don't, we don't want to have an empire anymore on which the sun never sets. We're not a threat in that regard, right? But it's like we have internal problems. you know our education system is failing too many people upon which we're going to depend
yeah, absolutely.
into the foreseeable future.
Hmm.
And I mean, forget about the moral aspect of it. It's like if we keep this up, we will run out of wealth, right?
Yeah.
Usable wealth,
Hmm.
right? It'll just be stuff,
Hmm.
right? And nobody will even know what to do with it,
Yeah.
right? And
The
like
whole
you
not.
you enjoy like sort of a unique overview of like how your economy and how your social structure works because of what you do for a living.
Mhm.
And like you yourself personally, I mean, I know it's hard for you to, take just sort of a neutral step back and say, wow, we might not be able to keep this up much longer. But that's the reality of it.
Yeah.
You guys are an island nation. I mean, you have a lot of natural resources, and
Hmm.
you have a whole lot more stable social structure than we do. We're a
Hmm.
mess, you
Yeah.
know. But you all don't, like you don't have that particular problem. Like some of it is really just, like I said, uh, apathy.
Yeah. The thing with not being allowed a political opinion is it's not public. So Her Majesty the Queen never stated what she thought politically, or very
No.
rarely. She did occasionally, express
Hmm.
herself. But what happens obviously is the sitting prime minister will visit the monarch on a weekly basis at a prearranged place and time, and
Hmm.
he will sit with the monarch and discuss political issues, the state of the nation, and everything else. And the idea being obviously that the monarch can then advise on what the monarch believes should be the best course of action. Prince or King Charles has never made any secret of the fact that he's an avid believer in sort of green energy and all this sort of thing. He's very much actually interested in nature and the climate and
Sure.
everything else.
Sure.
So, I'm sure those kinds of discussions are had behind closed doors. And, we like that. It's nice to have that. Obviously, you're old enough to remember the fallout of Diana passing away.
Hmm. Yeah.
And, the country kind of lost its mind around that one.
Hmm.
But by that point in time, Queen Elizabeth wasn't just grandmother to Harry and William. She was grandmother to us all.
True.
And in a time of national mourning, all we wanted was our grandmother, this sort of steadying force.
Yeah.
And that's why there was quite a big clamour for her to come back to London rather than be up in Balmoral in Scotland. So,
Yeah.
obviously Char-
And I
Charles
mean,
is very, very
go
early
ahead.
in his reign. He's barely been in the job a year.
Mhm.
And, we should also remember that it is at the end of a job.
Right.
When when Elizabeth ascended to the throne, she didn't turn around and say, I'm going to rule you all with an iron fist. It was
No,
a case of, I'm going to do my best, to do everything in my power to allow you all to have the lives that you want. And I will serve you until my dying day, which she did.
it did. Yeah.
Right up until the point they took the scepter off of her coffin.
Hmm.
She was still serving the British people and the Commonwealth.
Yeah. She
And
never, she never did a bad job. And,
no,
ironically, uh, the, the anti-monarchy sentiment, grew larger and louder, under her reign, than most of the previous ones. Um, but like I said, that's even the will or lack thereof of the British people, of now Charles subjects. Like when Diana died, that uh, it, it's like I come from a world where I don't expect, and I don't want, any kind of uh guiding hand, parental, stabilizing force function from anybody in my government. Now you all have that, and you've kind of shaped your your culture and your social order around it. But like I said, and even back to Elizabeth, and I'd be willing to bet that behind those closed doors, in conference, however often, weekly, with the prime minister, I'd be willing to bet, at some point in all those years, she probably just looked at him and said, uh, this is really not a very good job. And I don't really like it that much. I can't say this out loud, but have you guys ever thought about what it would be like if we just did this differently? Right? Either give me more power or get me out of here. you know. Um, but I suppose we'll never know. But like I said, it isn't anything that Elizabeth, had ever done, um, or that Charles is likely to do. That's the problem. It really isn't. The I don't know. You guys are just so stoic, and slow to change. I mean, thankfully, you're very slow to anger, unlike us. We get angry all the time, and you guys very rarely do. There isn't very much widespread unrest and like loud criticism uh, from the British people internally. But like I said, I wish sometimes that the British people, would be a little quicker to anger when that's what is called for.
I think part of that comes from the fact that when we get angry, it doesn't end well for anybody.
It is. I mean, you got to put some like, you got to put a little swerve on it and be reasonable. Yeah, I mean that's that old, poem, when the British get angry. This is
Mm,
basically when the British get angry, like then you kind of let go of, uh like civility. When you go really hard.
yeah,
So but it's
yeah.
like but in the world that we live in now, and you see this every day, um, the the thing to do is go, but make sure you don't wait until you really have to go hard. It's like the sooner the better. And like Brexit is a really good example of that. Because the British government and the British people, I don't remember before, really a few years back, that the introduction of preceding the European Union, there was the introduction of the euro, right? And uh, um, the common currency, and then shortly thereafter the European Union. You know, I remember like the Germans, being the Germans and the Nordic countries being a lot more excited about a European Union than like the UK or like Greece or Italy. They all became part of it, but I got the feeling you guys weren't all that happy about it. You just didn't say anything, and now and I say, and now here we are.
Thing is, the EU became what Hitler was trying to do in
Yeah, but
creating a
I know, but
German led
yeah,
um, empire, I guess.
oh, lack of a better term.
Yeah,
But didn't
but
you see that coming?
I think, yes, the British
Okay.
people probably, the British people probably did. The British people did see it coming. That's why we've gotten the hell back out of it again. The problem is, right, the EU morphed from what it started out as, which was a trading bloc.
Hmm.
Okay, the European Economic Community,
Right.
which was basically to get goods from all the European nations across Europe quickly and easily.
Hmm.
And it started to with the introduction of the European Union, which was the political entity, it started to take on the trappings of statehood.
Yes.
And that is when we decided, we're not so sure about this. And I don't know how much of the stuff you've seen out of the EU Parliament, and people like Guy Verhofstadt
Hmm.
and others, you might as well have been back in 1930s Berlin with some of the rhetoric and
Yeah.
the zealotry and everything else.
Yeah.
And
Like I said,
out of,
it's not that this time around, there was all this. They didn't have like nefarious intent. You're right. I mean, it was, it started out as, uh, just reorganizing the trading bloc,
mm,
that sort of crippled along for a really long time, and creating a common currency to facilitate that. But you know,
the
the the the kind of uh, imperialism that, like I say, that that you're seeing now, it always comes from that. It's like it has to,
yeah,
once you get um a hegemony of trade, right, and a common currency, and like everybody is on the same page, then right behind that there has to come sanction and what we would call legislation. Things have
yeah,
to be regulated, and that's when the bad actors start to step in,
yeah. See,
because they're going to be the first thing out of their mouth is going to be just follow me and I will get you where you want to go.
yeah. I mean, I'm just looking up the euro now. It started in 1999, and for the first 3 years of its existence, it was what they called an invisible currency,
Right.
and it was actually became physical on the 1st of January 2002. So I mean, the euro is 21 years old,
Mm-hmm.
but you could tell our unease of it with it because we didn't adopt it. We were asked the question as the electorate, "Do you want to join the euro?" And we sort of said, "No,
Yeah.
thank you, but no, thank you." You know, and because of our geographical location, we've always had a very uneasy relationship with continental Europe and the countries
Yes,
within.
that is true. You have.
We'd, who was it? Oh, we were having a discussion last week in the NCFM meeting, and we were talking about the history of language and everything else. Now,
Yeah.
English as we know it is what we call a Mongol language. It has very many different elements to it.
Mhm.
There's Latin in there, there's French in there, there's German in there,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. Danish in a bit of Danish in there as well.
Yeah.
So it comes from the Angles,
Right.
Saxons, and what have you.
Right.
That's how the English language all started. A country that has been invaded as many times as we have, as many different changes of culture and identity and everything else. It's only understandable that you're going to be a little bit uneasy when people start talking about wanting to bring everything together.
Mhm.
And I suppose the best way to describe the UK is an outward looking isolationist country.
Yeah.
We, we would rather be left alone to do our own thing, but we're keeping an eye on everything else that's going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Whereas the United States is a very inward looking isolationist country.
True.
The United States only really looks within its own borders
Yeah.
and is like, just leave us alone to do our own thing. Thank you very
Right.
much. We don't. We're sort of looking around, going, we don't like this very much.
Yeah.
And taking this back to the monarchy, the Queen was able to go around the world and quietly say in the right ears, we're watching you and we don't like what you are doing. And
Yeah.
so that's sort of some of our
Yeah.
involvement in
Well,
conflicts down the years and what have you. But
it avoided a lot of things that would have been bad for Britain and probably the world at large. And again, like she was just good at that kind of thing.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
mean, she like had that aptitude right along. And
Mm,
this is why, so many people, not only in Britain, but really everywhere, really liked her.
mm,
Everybody was like, yeah, that's just Queen Elizabeth. Um,
yeah.
and kind of, was um the I don't know how you'd even put it, like the icon of, how to be a British monarch, how to
Mm,
be any kind of a monarch,
yeah.
right? Anywhere after, the first 10 years of the 20th century, if you weren't like her, you weren't much of a monarch, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, she could just do it, right?
Yeah.
And but I'm saying is that was kind of particular to her, you know.
Well, you say that, see, it's because of her father. During the Second World War, obviously she was a young princess and what have you, so she would have been,
Mhm.
scared stiff.
Sure.
And, he was given the option to take the family to Canada
Hmm.
into exile
Right.
for however long the war was going to last. And he said no. And part of her whole thing was, I have to be seen to be believed. So she had
Yeah.
to be amongst the people
Yeah.
as often as possible.
Right.
Hence the reason she had such a strong work ethic. And this woman was working well into her 90s,
Hmm.
going around the world. All right, last maybe 3 years of her life, she slowed right down, particularly after um, Philip died.
Right.
She really did slow right down then.
Yeah.
But there's also a story from one of the last Jubilee events. It was pissing down with rain in the centre of London, right?
Hmm.
And she was on a boat on the Thames. She's come round a bend in the river into London, and there is just people absolutely everywhere.
Yeah.
And apparently, she's just turned round to Prince Philip, beaming, saying, "Oh, wow, look at all of these people. Will you just look at them?"
Yeah.
And I think that says something about the affection with which she was held
Hmm.
within just within this country.
Yeah.
And I think she's the only monarch to have gone into the Republic of Ireland Senate.
Yeah.
One of the most Republican countries on earth,
Yeah.
and she's been into the Senate to speak
Yeah.
to the politicians, and she spoke to them in Gaelic
Hmm.
for
Again,
a short.
and like I said, that's kind of my point. She did
Mm,
it because she could,
yeah,
you know, like particularly, it's like
mm,
this one person,
yeah,
and it's, I guess, like I said, the limitation, just really inherited by Charles or by whomever came after,
mm,
is that a whatever they do, no matter how whatever he does, no matter how well he does it, um
he's going to be compared to
it
his mum.
yeah, I mean, at best it's going to be this expected echo of Elizabeth,
Mm,
like yeah, you handle that the same way Elizabeth did, and it's a darn good thing.
yeah,
And like I said, that's not his fault, right?
mm,
You know, uh that's not something, that's not a responsibility of the crown that is, that's on paper. It just
mm,
is,
yeah,
and the way things are now, that's the most important part. As you said it yourself, this is uh very resolutely constitutional monarchy,
mm,
and the the ability to be clever, right, and be uh nimble and adroit is
mm,
very limited
mm,
for, and it always was for her.
mm-hmm,
I mean, she just worked around it because she was just that good.
yeah,
you know and like I say, the issue with following that is, that for him, for Charles, it has to follow that way.
Mm.
And it's like that's not written in the Constitution anywhere. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, and well, we say constitutional monarch, but UK doesn't actually have a written constitution. At
I
least
thought you
not in.
did.
No, we don't. We've got the
Don't
Magna Carta.
don't you think you should have one? I'm just
No,
saying.
no.
Oh, of course not. You're a Brit. You would say that.
The reason I don't think we should is because, as with a religion, people can have a fundamental belief in that one document.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
unfortunately, I know we're talking about my country here, but it's something I see and hear an awful lot that comes out of your shores.
Mhm.
It's in our constitution. Well, yeah, it is, but your constitution has got how many different amendments to it from the original founding document?
Yeah. Yeah.
You, you know, and it was the Australian comedian. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Really funny guy, disabled. Adam Hills, that's the one. Adam Hills. Anyone listening, go and look up Adam Hills from Australia. Brilliant comedian. And he made a joke of you can't change a change. And without having that document in place, obviously having the Magna Carta there, which is sort of this is what the Britain is, or England it was at the time. It was like the
Mhm.
13th century, so the UK didn't actually exist. It's although it's a historically founding document and it removes power from the monarch. That's
Mhm.
literally you know, every man in England is born free, and
Yeah.
these are guiding principles by which we try to make our laws and by which all men live. It, when people talk about Britain and slavery, for example, most people I don't think know that slavery was abolished in England in 1087.
Yeah.
So
I knew that.
any slave that set foot on English soil following 1087 was automatically free,
Yeah.
and everything was then later, a couple of centuries later, was enshrined in the Magna Carta. So
Yeah.
you know we don't have a written constitution, but
No, I
everybody
mean,
kind of knows the rules.
yeah. I mean,
Being two and a
between
half thousand years
the
old as a country helps.
exactly and the um well, you say, we don't have a constitution, and I had always thought, that uh there was some kind of a, uh replacement or amplification document to the Magna Carta, but between the Magna Carta and the Code of British Common Law, I mean, that's kind of a constitution.
It is, yes,
It's
yeah,
old, yeah. I mean, and it predates our constitution by quite a ways, but I
yes.
mean, it is that, you
Mm,
know, but I mean, the point I'm trying to make is because you have that, and
hmm
really, all of you have had that for a long time,
hmm
longer than we've been a country over here.
hmm
And you did uh, um, experiment with, the with that kind of governance without a monarchy, and you decided it didn't work.
Yep.
So like all the way back there, the power structure decided, well, you know never mind, we are going to have a monarchy, you
Yeah.
know but it's going to be, it's going to be this. It's not going to be what we had before,
hmm
which, I like, rightfully so. That, I don't know what the hell that was all about, but
Yeah.
um,
Divine right of kings and everything else.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that didn't seem quite right to me, but what I'm saying is, based on that, and maybe this is something that falls uh to the ministry and the houses of commons and lords,
Mm,
to say this had been unjust and um, uh, unsustainable, not to not to our citizens, but to this family,
Mm.
and so, maybe the vote should be, you know, should they be granted, should that family, because it's a family,
Yes.
should it be granted um, not a divine right of, of king and successionship, but be granted, you know, like, I guess, political power within the Magna Carta and the common law.
I It wouldn't work. I think you would have to write a US style constitution
Well,
or
don't do that.
no, exactly. No, that's a
Whatever
bad
you do,
idea.
don't do that.
Um,
Um,
unless it was written within the constitution that this constitution is not a rigid document and can be changed at any moment via an act of parliament or in your case Congress. So you'd either have to do that or you'd have to rip up the Magna Carta and go back to the 12th and 13th century essentially.
well,
And
again, I think a workable and reasonable middle ground could be found.
it
You don't have to do it like we do. I mean,
no, I
the only thing about, what we do is that, you know, that we have a non-hereditary succession of power to our legislative and executive branches. That's just done by, supposedly, by vote.
mm,
That peacefully, kind of passes back and forth between, two towers of wealth and privilege. So I certainly don't suggest that.
no.
We don't go by us because we do it wrong, right?
Yeah, I mean
Uh,
the House of Commons really isn't that much different to be honest. There's nothing common about 99% of the people in there.
no, no, I mean,
Um,
right, they, in fact, all the more reason, because your House of Commons, and I'd argue to some degree even your House of Lords, it looks too often too much like our Congress and Senate as far as what they do. I mean, they do it a little bit different, but the
mm,
outcomes are too often similar,
yeah, and
you
the
know.
biggest difference between the political system over here and obviously over in the States is it's a multi-party system, not two, for a start.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, the Commons has obviously the British Conservatives, Labour, Liberal Democrats, the Greens, Scottish Nationals. You also have, I think, Plaid Cymru. I've got a couple of members,
Mhm.
and obviously the way it works is, people get. We've obviously got the devolved governments. So Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales have got their own governments, and then they stand on their own national ballots and then on the UK ballot during the general election. So they can then be elected into the Houses of Parliament if they have enough votes. So,
Mm.
all parties from all around the UK are represented in the Houses of Parliament. That's the way it's meant to work. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work like that.
No.
Generally, you've got four or five parties represented.
Right. Yeah, I
Um,
mean, that's, that's not, like I say, that's kind of a reason to, to introduce more. I mean, if there's going to be a monarchy, to introduce more, direct operational control
to be
within
honest,
the government, because
I don't think it's
you have four or five political parties, and
yeah. To be
I guess my thing is the fear of the monarchy, um you know uh overreaching or overusing whatever additional powers they're granted, is neutralized by the fact that, unlike over here, where the same outfit that gets, at least half of the people or half of the elected officials into the House and Senate also, fills fills the seat in the Oval Office. So
Mm.
you wouldn't have to worry about that over there, at least not so much.
Yeah, I think part of the reason we like it the way it is because it's traditional. Tradition
I know,
is a big thing for
I
us,
know, I know, I know.
and that baffles people to a certain degree. I
It
literally
baffles me.
the only real power that's the monarchy has is whether or not the armed forces get sent to war, and generally that's academic.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know of any time that the monarch in my lifetime has said no. Um, and also new laws have to be given royal assent, which again is really just a rubber stamp. The law's pretty much
Yeah,
through by that point anyway.
right, right. I mean, a new law is introduced, or the repealing of the law, is introduced, and it first hits uh the floor of your houses, like in year X, and there's a weekly meeting between the prime minister and the crown, from then until year Y, when the time comes for the crown to approve it. So for all those years it was Queen Elizabeth, sitting behind a closed door listening to the prime minister, either shill for this new law or you know advise
Mm,
against it for like once a week, every week, until it comes time for a vote.
mm,
So of course, you know, they're I mean, she probably at least once said, no, I'm gonna go ahead and, and approve this law anyway. But it
mm.
probably, like, almost every time, whatever the prime minister, was pushing for, that's the way it would be,
Yeah,
you know. So
yeah.
again,
But
I'm not saying this is easy,
no,
and I'm not saying that it isn't subject to undue influence and corruptible incentives. There's no perfect system, you
no.
know, but I maintain that, especially now, if the monarchy is going to continue, then for everybody's sake, it needs more of a seat at the table. But that's just me, or otherwise, if I was any one of them, even like prior to Elizabeth, I would have said, look, you're asking me to do a job I can't really do because you won't let me,
Mm,
you know. And yeah, I'm supposed to have the authority. It's like veto power for the president, you
mm,
know. I mean, every time the president vetoes a bill, it's splashed across the headlines,
mm,
because it's like that's not what the president is supposed to do. You know, the president is supposed to, rubber stamp approve whatever laws, whatever BS laws the House and Senate pass.
mm,
Right. But I mean, our presidents do veto, but that's because they're politicians. They're not
mm,
monarchs,
mm,
right? And when they get elected to power, their number one job is to keep it.
mhm.
So yeah, they will do things that are, out of tune once in a while. But
Yeah, it's
the
the
uh,
monarchy's not necessarily about power. This is the other thing. And I think if we were having this conversation even 15 years ago, when it was Queen Elizabeth on the throne,
mm.
I might have been more inclined to say, yeah, maybe we should. Um,
Well, here, I'll
and
put it to you. I'll put it
and
to you
I'll
this
wait
way.
and I'll
Oh, go
wait
ahead.
another 15, 20 years until it's William on the throne,
Uh,
and then have the same conversation again.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And again, you're a Brit. That's not unexpected. But here's the thing. Okay. Say, well, let's go back 20 years. I mean, you were
Hmm.
still around then,
Hmm.
right? 20 years ago, just the dawn of the 21st century.
Hmm.
If if the British government, somehow or another was able to arrange it so that Elizabeth herself, right, was suddenly at least just only in terms of internal policy decision making, about your systems of education and healthcare and public works and internal security,
Mhm,
like safety.
mhm.
If suddenly, I mean, she was granted, by whatever means, granted more direct control over it, would you trust that?
With
And
her, yes.
we're talking about Elizabeth II here.
Yes. With her, yes.
Yeah. Like I said, uh that's because her talent, as a world leader was particular to her.
Yeah. It
But
might
had that happened, say it happened 30 years ago, right? And suddenly, all of a sudden, Elizabeth II calls the shots and calls the ball when it comes to educational policy or public works, fixing the roads, right, and law enforcement, and trade. Like she would be responsible for it,
hmm
along with your parliament.
hmm
Okay. Then, Charles was already alive at that time. I think 30 years ago, he was already an adult, right?
Charles is in his 70s, so
Yeah. So, well, yeah, he was, in fact, 30 years ago, that was still after Diana's death, right?
no, 4 years
No.
before.
Okay.
They,
All right.
they were
Well,
married a year before I was born.
right. But a point I'm trying to make is that that would make for some, very different and more pointed conversations between Charles and Elizabeth long before he long before now, right?
See,
So look, Charlie, here's the thing, after I'm gone, whatever the problem is, it's all your fault, you
yeah,
know. And
yeah.
that's what everyone's gonna say.
We got to remember the generation that Elizabeth is from, pre Second World War. Was she born
Right.
2026? She was born.
Yeah, it was between the First and Second World War.
Yeah,
And
and
as the economic collapse was kind of happening. Yeah.
yeah. So, and also, who her father was. He was a man of the Victorian era,
Well,
and so self discipline and all this stuff was an awful lot stronger.
mhm.
I tell you now, I wouldn't trust Harry with anything. Not over the last 10 years. I wouldn't trust him to protect a warm cup of piss now. I really wouldn't.
No.
He's too far gone,
Mhm.
unfortunately. Because the man that he became in his military career, I would have given him the keys to the nuclear codes
Sure.
and said, "Can you look after those for us?" And
Sure.
hope to
And
God we never need them. But I wouldn't trust him now.
no.
I would trust Elizabeth, obviously Her Majesty the Queen.
Mhm.
I would trust King Charles to a degree with them,
Mhm.
and I know for a fact you with William and Kate, they're in very good hands.
Yeah. In fairness to Charles, again, I think if these things had transpired, you know, 30, maybe 30 plus years ago, um, like he would have been by default better prepared to do what he's doing now than he is.
Mm,
If you don't have the same level of confidence with him that you did with Elizabeth, you can kind of see why, right? But it
I,
had all those things been Elizabeth's responsibility, you know, um, for the second or the last half of her reign,
mm,
then everything would be focused on, because even 30 years ago, there was talk, wow, Elizabeth is like, in her what
60s.
she was in her uh
Well into her 90s
70s.
when she passed.
Yeah.
but she was in her 60s.
Yeah. Yeah. But, there was already talk that, wow, succession. I mean, she's not going to live forever. And,
Yeah,
the internal policy discussion would begin to focus on Charles, and he would know that,
that
you
was
know.
going on. That would have been going on anyway. Maybe not in the way that you're talking about, but the Queen's passing would have been planned for the day after she became Queen.
Yeah, I mean, she
And
became queen a lot longer than 30 years ago, though.
well, yeah, yeah. I mean, as soon as her father died, plans would have been put in place for anything to happen to her.
Mhm.
You got to remember the
Oh,
Queen.
yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, I see what you mean. And yeah, you're right. But
Mm,
I guess what I mean is, tradition and this equilibrium notwithstanding, when Elizabeth became the queen, again, you guys, you hit the jackpot, you
yeah,
know. I mean, you just did. Like, if it hadn't worked out that way, there might not even be a monarchy tradition or no, but she was just that good for just that long,
the,
and but
we got lucky
everything,
for multi generations. That's the thing. It
yeah,
wasn't just
yeah,
Elizabeth. It
hell,
was the way.
most of the people that were adults when she was crowned aren't with us anymore,
No,
you know,
I
and
have
like a lot of their children aren't with us anymore.
no.
you know,
You got to remember her father is very highly regarded for his
he's a
reign
good
as king.
king.
Yeah,
He's a good king.
and you got to go back to her distant relative who was Victoria.
Hmm.
She kind of set the standard.
Yeah, yeah, she
The
was a good
queen,
queen.
fantastic queen, and obviously
Mm-hmm.
Albert and
Mm-hmm.
all of that. So
Right.
obviously she passed in 1901,
Mm-hmm.
and I think Albert passed long before her.
Yeah.
So we got lucky. I would say probably from Elizabeth the First for the
Well,
most part. For the
case
most
could be
part,
made. Yeah, I
for the most
agree.
part with the royal line,
Yeah, I
there
agree.
hasn't been. I can't really think of a major dud. Maybe
No,
one or two, but
no, not really. I
we
mean,
got luck.
people used to complain about Elizabeth's father being too Victorian. But again, he was the king of England,
Mm,
and and the crown of Great Britain,
and the
when
empire as well.
and the empire, when uh the whole attitude about imperialism for the first time ever was looked at as, not the ultimate end goal of having a country.
Mm,
Before that, the only reason to have a country was to expand.
yeah.
That otherwise it's a bunch of needless, hassle and expense. But
Hmm.
anyway, what the point I'm trying to get at is, even from the time, let's forget about when your Elizabeth became the queen. You know, a lot of stuff happened shortly after she became the queen.
Hmm.
That like I wasn't even around for most of it,
Hmm.
right? But from when I did show up and became aware, but even before adulthood, things were beginning to change a little bit.
Hmm.
But the thing that really stood her out was how good she was at adapting to it.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of focusing on the last 20 to 30 years, um, mostly because you know traditions really around the world are beginning to crumble, right?
Yes.
And destabilize and become a source of contention everywhere, just because of how things are just right now.
But do you think
Mhm.
having a country like the United Kingdom, which has held on steadfastly to its traditions, and I believe is likely to long after I'm gone, and possibly after my children have gone, having that stabilized, because the one thing about us is we're not an imperial nation anymore. We don't have
No,
the empire. But what we
no,
do have is an almost enormous amount of world influence, even over
yeah,
America.
for sure. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I mean uh the United Kingdom has, it has influence, like positive influence in really more places than the United States does, because everybody kind of likes you guys.
I would.
Even countries that don't like you, grudgingly respect you.
Yeah, I think that's more of it. It's like,
you know, but
yeah,
again, this isn't about the
and if
uh
the world is going to go to hell in a handbasket,
mhm,
which it kind of is, having
yeah,
that one stabilizing focus that sort of, a lighthouse in the mist, as it were,
mhm,
or in this case, a lighthouse in the fog,
yeah,
gives gives people sort of hope that maybe we can recover and that this isn't going to be as bad as it looks like it's going to be.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that I think is the ultimate role of the British monarch. Is no matter how bad it gets, we can always turn to them and say, "Thank God they're there."
I say that you're kind of arguing my case here.
But if
I mean, yes,
they,
you're absolutely right. The current goodwill that your uh, that your nation state enjoys
mm,
outside of it,
mm,
is maybe going to be one of those things going to play a major role in being capable of putting the whole thing back together after it falls apart.
yeah,
you know because it will. I mean, one nice thing about British culture is, it's been kind of worldwide for a long time,
yeah,
right? Like a long time. And so you're used to the culture, and a lot of the governmental structure is used to um you know being uh being a hand in putting things back together in places well out, where it's dark when you have sunshine, right?
yeah.
The other side of the world. So that's like I say, I agree with that. But the
My
only stipulation is, like you and your own family, and the families, in your community, right? They have to be able to share in that, uh, that
yeah,
sense of hope and that sense of stability also. And if you're just bound to that taking on the shape of the crown, then, like I said, I mean, I know the idea of more royal power is terrifying, but in
it.
the right set of hands, it would be safer and more useful now than ever before in your past.
I think is I don't think in the circumstance I've just described, I don't think giving the crown any political power is going to be necessary. I
And
think
I know you
ha-
don't think I know you don't think it would be necessary.
because that wouldn't be their job.
Well,
They're,
and
they're
I'm willing to bet they wouldn't want it to be their job.
no,
Certainly,
I don't.
Charles wouldn't.
No, I
You
think
know,
they would
uh,
see their job as a focal point for bringing the world back together again. I don't think we're heading for another world war. He says,
well, yeah, I was going to
hopefully.
say famous last words, but okay. So, given all that, and you know, there not being another world war, the kind of decline that we're talking about is, uh, it's going to be incremental.
Hmm.
The meteor won't ever, uh, hit us, but things will just continue to decline a little bit and a little bit and a little bit.
Yeah,
You know,
it's
and
the lobster in the pot with the ever
exactly,
increasing heat, isn't it? Yeah.
exactly. That it's that kind of thing. And again, uh if well, and I like to think that one day, if America gets its head out of its rear end, that together, maybe for the first time in a long time, first time since the Second World War, it really would be, the US and Canada and the United Kingdom and, uh, its protectorates that would
Yeah.
be the only thing left, to, again, put things back together, right?
Mm.
After they've kind of fallen apart. But everybody, for one thing, has to agree, right? That, like, out of everyone involved, I think of the citizens of the United Kingdom, to look at all that and say, you know, um, we've been holding you guys up for like 1,000 years now, and all you do is tear everything apart, right?
Mm.
You know, maybe screw you.
I see that's talking about us British getting angry.
Yeah, don't you
Uh,
think that, are you saying that's no longer possible?
it's not desirable, and I will tell you why. The last time Britain got angry, they built three aircraft which could drop a nuclear bomb,
I'm saying though, yeah, I mean,
and
you
we were
guys are
quite
scary even to us, and that's kind of the point. That's what I'm driving at. No, it's
because
not desirable, but neither is global decline.
no, but I don't think we need to be angry. It, I'll try and explain this. Being angry is what I used to be when the kids played up when they were 5 or 6.
Mhm.
Now being angry has absolutely no use. It has no effect on them.
True.
Being disappointed
Yeah.
has a far greater effect. And I think if the British were just to turn around to the rest of the world and say, "We're just really disappointed in you. We've 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 given you all of these tools. We've developed and distributed a common language,
Yeah.
which is the global language of things like aviation.
Hmm.
Every
Most of
pilot,
trade, yeah,
yeah,
it's all English.
it's all
The concept of, as you say, common law
yeah,
and a charter, that
mm,
wasn't just the divine right of kings.
yeah,
It all came out of Britain.
yeah,
The concept of, of abolishing, uh humans owning other humans. It
hmm
came out of Britain. I don't care
yeah,
what anybody says. you
yeah,
know it comes from you all.
yeah.
And yeah,
And
I
if
mean, it would be disappointing after all that,
and I
to
think the way to look at it is Britain is the rest of the world is 15, 16, 17 years of age, for example.
mm,
Britain is the middle-aged, slightly worn-out parent. You've
yeah.
just Britain said, look, you don't mind you going to the party, don't drink to excess, don't sleep around, don't take drugs. And we've just found out you've done all three. There's no
Right,
point in us shouting at you, taking you
right,
out the back and smacking you on the backside and what have you. We're just gonna
right.
look at you and just go, I'm just really disappointed in you. I can't believe you've done everything I told you not to do.
Yeah,
And
and
if you love, any child that loves their parents to hear those words, I'm disappointed in you. That is far more effective than any ass kicking's ever gonna be.
I think so. And
You
I
know,
think, no, you're right. And I think, oh, like, that's that it's kind of a paternalistic, attitude, but in my opinion, it's well earned.
mm.
But like the
And could
nation of
you,
Britain isn't just, one dad or one mom. There's a lot of people in Britain,
yeah, and
and like collectively, and I really think individually, the being able to speak and, um, and assert itself with one voice, which you
I
guys do pretty good. I mean, you do better than we do. But
Could
being able to do that means that, everybody feels like they have an equal voice.
but could you imagine not giving King Charles any kind of political power to make any political decisions, but him coming on the television? It's all gone to shit in a handbasket. The world's a complete and utter fucking mess in worse ways than we can possibly imagine. And King Charles or one of his descendants comes on the TV and just says, "Look, I'm just really disappointed in what you've all done."
I know
Because
what if I know what effect it would have on me. I would be like, yeah, he's right. I'm disappointed too.
it's not just a case of, oh, well, yeah, I guess he's right. It's like global navel gazing. It's like, shit.
They should.
Yeah,
They
we've,
should.
we've, you know, we've upset our parents.
Yeah. That would be the appropriate response. Yes.
Yeah, I don't think that's
Because
actually
again,
what would
again,
happen, but, you know.
well, yeah, but that's what should happen.
Mm,
Because if we're speaking in terms of, uh, you know, uh, uh, I guess, parenting, like um, giving, giving an uplift from where all people were to where they are now. That again, it all originates from Great Britain.
mm,
It just does. I mean, it was many times it was handled very poorly, but that's where it came from. I mean, it didn't come from us. We weren't even there.
mm,
You know, I mean, all we were was kind of a coastal outpost, that was sitting in the middle of a lot of other hostile outposts, you
mm,
know, literally colonies, right?
mm,
But everything, everything that's of any use that we have over here, and that we've taken like most of the credit for, honestly, it did. It originated, in Great Britain.
mm.
Again, it's, you're right. If whoever the monarch is at the time, just got in front of all the cameras and looked at everybody and said, you know, this is deeply disappointing, then yeah, the appropriate response should be, oh man, we really screwed up.
Yeah,
But I think it won't be that,
no, it won't. Of course it won't. Of course it won't.
um,
But what you do not want Britain to become angry. There's a reason why we try to temper our anger, and because we become angry, we either build three nuclear capable bombers that are fully that we are fully prepared to use, or we go and dominate the globe
right.
and
And
try
again,
and
that it's you just refuse to become angry, because when you do collectively, you kind of lose control,
yeah,
and
and
like
it's
don't know exactly how to turn it off.
yeah, it's part. It Hitler wasn't taking on an armed force when in 1940 he threatened to invade us. He wasn't even threatening ideals. He was threatening a mindset. And it's the mindset that you see in all the films with Churchill and everything else.
Mhm. Yeah,
If you're going to take over this island, you are going to have to kill everybody.
right,
It's,
right. It was a unified voice,
mm,
from a unified mindset. Not
yeah,
not a single Brit, was in like any mood, to be moved into by the, by the Reich.
yeah.
you know,
And
and
the
I would
bit,
I
the
would
best
say that.
illustration I can
Well, I
give
was
you
going to
of,
say I would by and large say that, because of tradition and because, things are stable there,
mm,
by and large that's still true.
mm,
you know that the British people are more often, unified in their uh position than not.
yeah,
You don't have the, the sectionalism and atomization that we have over here.
We
You
do
know?
to a degree, but what you'll find is, okay, you'll have Englishmen, Welshmen, Scotsmen, Irishmen all having a go at one another.
Mhm.
Okay, say like you're in a bar, there's the four of them
Right,
in there, and they're all just having a go at one another. You
right.
walk in and say something to one of them to have a go at one of them. You've now got to take on all four.
All four. Yeah,
It's like
right. Yeah,
we're allowed to give each other grief. You don't get involved.
right,
Stay out of it. And
right.
the biggest illustration I can give you as to the British mindset when we're threatened is obviously you've heard of Hadrian's Wall, yeah?
Yeah.
Do you know why that was built,
Why?
Hadrian's Wall? To keep the Scots out.
Oh, I thought you meant there was some, like underlying philosophy behind it. But yeah, I mean, Hadrian's Wall was built to keep the Scots on the other side.
Yeah, because you won't find anything Roman in Scotland,
Right,
okay? Because the
right.
Romans got up there and got their asses handed to them.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
they had enough of just getting annihilated by the Scots. And so, you know, they built Hadrian's Wall not to mark any kind of border. It was literally to keep the Scots from coming back into England.
right.
And that's kind of the
Which they did do. I mean,
yeah,
they weren't entirely innocent in the whole thing either.
no. But that's kind of the sorry, that's become sort of the British mindset. And it was what we called the Blitz spirit or the Dunkirk spirit.
Mhm.
We've not had to use it. And this is the other thing. We haven't had to use it for a very, very long time.
Right, right.
But I've said it a couple of times now. The biggest reason we don't get angry is because it's not a good outcome for anybody else,
Yeah. I
and
mean,
we would we would rather not go there. Thank you.
right. Yeah, I mean, the limiting factor in all of that, as much as anything else, is, you know, like the toll that it takes on you for
Mm,
getting that angry.
yeah,
I mean, it's not free for you either.
no,
Especially because, again, it's not just one person, it's the British people.
mm,
And this is all hard won experience and wisdom. Um, and the things that have been done with it, again, you know, uh, the the globalizing of modern civilization, it again, it originates
mm,
from Great Britain as much as anywhere else, you
yeah,
know. And so, my position is, because you can't just say, I mean,
mm,
the
yeah,
British people and the British government can't just say, well, because everything has changed, we're just going to scrap everything and start over. You can't really do that.
no,
Well, can't you could, but it wouldn't work, right?
no,
Then you'd be right back, like with Cromwell. You'd say, well, that sucked. We're going to put it back the way it was. You
yeah.
know,
And this is the thing. We found something that works for us.
mhm,
You know, everybody can be critical of it. You cannot understand it. You can certainly not like it. Most British people will turn around and say, "We just simply don't give a fuck what you think," and that's another attitude that's gone sort of global.
mhm.
There are plenty of Americans I know for a fact that couldn't care less what British people have to say about things that go on in America,
True.
and that's fine. But
It's fun.
we're
It's,
still going to disapprove of you like a parent that's just
yeah. I was going to say, like, maybe for the first time in history, in U.S. history, uh, the the viewpoint and attitude of the British people, you know, carries more weight now than ever before, more legitimate weight,
in
because,
what way? In
well,
what way?
mostly because of what we are not doing, which is, we're not taking that hard look at ourselves. You guys kind of are,
Mm,
so we've reached a point, ironically, where we should be listening to you, but we
mm,
are not, and it's like that's unlikely to change, but taking it back to uh how you all do what you do. Yeah, it's um this is not the time for the British to become angry. I think we can all agree on that.
yeah.
This is not the time for the British people to just throw up their hands and say, we're going to change everything about our government and social structure.
Mm,
It's not the time for that, because it's just kind of the same, sort of mindless, unreasoning, frightening anger.
mm, yeah.
But I do insist that it is time, for it's time for the British people, to reassess the uh, the ongoing success and validity of the traditions that have worked so well for them for so long, not because those are wrong or like morally not as good. It's just that everything has changed. And
Mm.
if Britain is counting on places like the United States to pick up the torch, I don't know. I just
I
I just don't know if we can do it.
I think the problem is, right, and this is my, why didn't Elizabeth decide, or Queen Elizabeth decide to hang up her hat and go to Balmoral and just smell the flowers every day? Probably because she didn't think Charles was ready in reality.
Right.
Why would we hold on to our traditions and not hand the baton off to somebody else like the United States, which has the global reach that it does? And it's because the United States is not ready. So we have
No.
we have to keep the traditions
Well,
in order
uh,
until somebody else is ready to take over.
yeah. And
And
I
the
mean, you're right. The
the
things that I'm talking about, I don't expect them to happen
mm,
in Britain. I certainly don't expect them to happen, very quickly over here.
mm,
Right. Um, and it's like we can hope that people will have the presence of mind, you know, as things continue degrading, if people have the presence of mind, to look around and see who does have a steady hand, and a clear head, right, and a solution, you
mm,
know because as we know, when there's a vacuum there, when things are bad, and nobody steps up, that really does have a steady hand and a clear head and a solution. You know what happens. I mean, you know Adolf Hitler was a paper hanger,
mm,
right, and a failed artist. The next thing
mm,
he's sitting in the seat of power in Germany.
yeah,
How could this possibly have happened? Because nobody else took the job,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And if it's like more globally and more like collectively, if it's going to be places like United Kingdom, hopefully the United States, Canada, um, I don't know, maybe France, to be to be a reachable and sustainable example of what to do, right? If that's what we're down to, then like I said, I would feel more comfortable if again, even your Charles, because that's the face of the British government to most of the rest of the world. I mean, people know who your prime minister is, and they're familiar enough with your members of parliament
mm,
whenever they get on the TV,
Hmm.
But beyond that, people don't pay that much attention to how you all do what you do, right?
Mm.
And the same thing goes over here. I mean, you might be the most knowledgeable person I know about how the United States functions of anybody that doesn't live in the United States.
Mm.
And that's just because you know people like me and you're kind of just a naturally curious dude.
Mm.
Nobody else cares, you know. They
Yeah.
don't. I mean, and it's like if we're supposed to be some kind of an example, if the example of Canada is Trudeau,
Oh, fucking
see what
hell.
I'm saying? Yeah, you know,
Ugh.
that's but like uh Charles has the opportunity to I guess make himself, into the object example for leadership, right?
I think
Now, nobody is going to expect that from Trudeau. Certainly, nobody's going to expect that from either Trump or Biden.
no.
No, nobody in leadership elsewhere in the world wants to do what they do. They just look at that and say, "I'm not going to do that," and I'm not going to support it.
Yeah. See, all King Charles has to do is go to his mum and dad's final resting place and look around him for inspiration on how to be a leader. He doesn't need any kind of political power to do that. There are ways to lead without the politics.
Again, Ted, I hope you're right because, as I said, the things I'm talking about are an academic exercise anyway. They aren't going
Yeah.
to happen in real life. So
No.
yeah, it will kind of have to be that. Whoever comes next into the Oval Office, right? I mean, there isn't a catacomb or burial ground or anything like that, for them to go to for inspiration, because our system doesn't really work that way.
Mm.
And for the places, and again, I hate to be, Western centric, but places like Canada, and Australia, New Zealand, um, France, and the Netherlands, Italy and Greece, like, they're either too new, it's like there isn't enough track record in places like Canada or Australia or anything like that. Or, in places like certainly Italy, Greece,
Mm.
anywhere Nordic, the Central Europeans like Germany, you know, their their inspiration is kind of checkered, you
Mm.
know. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And so, it's like whoever's driving the bus in those places, you know, they're going to have to come up with their own solutions.
Mm.
Charles doesn't really have that problem. Maybe neither does oh well
And you've got
maybe
with the other thing with monarchy is, or the British
mhm,
monarchy, it's connected to every other monarchy in Europe, including
yeah,
the former Russian monarchy,
mhm,
the Tsar, because
yeah,
you know, in
yeah,
incest is a game for the whole family, folks.
right. Yeah,
You
I
know.
mean, yeah, they have those, lineage type connections. Um, and
They're all
again,
related.
there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there were good, effective leaders in the Russian Empire. There were certainly good, effective leaders, in what is now Italy, what had been the Roman Empire.
Mm.
At which, let's be honest about it, your royal family you know, has some connections there, right?
Yeah.
you know, so no, I mean, it's not the kind of, leadership inspiration where you reach into the distant past, and listen for the echo of the, of the long dead,
Mm,
when back in the day when they were doing it right.
mm,
That's not what I mean exactly. You know,
mm.
um, a lot has changed just in our lifetime, just since
Yeah.
you and I have been alive.
Yes.
And it's not that, the virtuousness, of those good leaders from back there is no longer useful, is maybe more useful now than ever before. But how to deploy it, and with whom, like I wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't trust that to someone like Joe Biden or Donald Trump or DeSantis or Trudeau or Macron,
Mm,
any of them, you know. Like I said, uniquely, Charles has a shot at it, you
yeah.
know. I mean, it's just blind circumstance that it's him,
Mm,
but he does,
mm,
and maybe that's the way it'll turn out. I mean, at the end of the day, I always thought he was kind of, he was a pretty good dude, right? And had a lot of bad luck for a royal, but at the same time, he does have a shot at, you know, at being an example of leadership that
mm.
we have completely run out of elsewhere.
Yeah.
We're
He,
just, we don't have it, you
yeah.
know.
He he just needs to think back to how his mum did it and try to do it as well as she did, and his grandfather and his father to a certain degree. I mean, Philip
Yeah.
wasn't perfect. Philip was
Um,
a bit of a strange one. He was a former naval officer, so he was a bit rough around the edges.
not so much that people say. They said he was a product of his time,
Yeah,
and they're not. I mean, not just of his circumstance, but also how everything was back then.
yeah,
And if there's, what that means is, it's kind of everybody's fault. So really means it's nobody's fault. It's just the way
yeah,
it worked out.
yeah.
So no, I've heard a lot of, like people nicking on him and being critical, but it's like there were so many ways that he could have done worse. It's
Well,
kind of a miracle that he did as well as he did.
to be honest with you, he did so much, particularly for young people. The Duke of Edinburgh Award scheme,
Hmm.
because that
Yeah.
was something you could put on your what we call your CV, or in America your resume.
All right. Yeah.
That was extremely favorably looked upon. So if
Sure.
a young person from any background had D of E on their CV,
Hmm.
that was like a rubber stamp. Oh, okay, you're
Right.
someone we can use.
Right.
And
Right.
I think he was very popular among sort of working class because
Hmm.
he had that slight roughness to him.
Right.
You know, stories of him making inappropriate comments and stuff like that. And I've personally heard stories from people that have met him. Like the story of him walking through a car factory,
Hmm.
and they put a plank of wood over the gullies where
Yeah.
I got fluids and stuff would run,
Right.
and he apparently just sort of stepped over it and he, oh fuck, was I meant to walk on that? And that that
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. Yeah.
he
That's a pretty minor, that kind of thing in the, you know, in the perspective of history, it don't make you a bad guy. But I mean, the broader criticisms were basically, he was a monarch that believed, Britain for the British, basically. But that was because that's what everyone thought at the time. He was just this side of uh, a dyed in the wool royal imperialist,
you've got to
right?
remember he
Because
was
that was how it was. There was no other, you know, like perspective. That was the expectation. It's like you better be a royal imperialist because that's your job.
well he was Greek by birth.
So
So he wasn't, he wasn't himself British born, but yeah, whatever.
no, but I'm
Um,
saying that's
so
where he
it's a
came from.
mindset. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
mindset.
and a mindset that was kind of at gunpoint.
But
Once it became clear that he was going to be the king of England, it was like,
he
yeah, I better be this way, or
he
they're going to
he
find
was
someone who will.
he was never called the king um, in any way. The thing is, he understood his
Well,
role
yeah.
within the.
What was his title?
He was the
I
Duke
mean,
of
his
Edinburgh, Queen consort. So
oh,
essentially, the Queen.
he was also recognized as the queen's consort.
Yeah,
Okay, but I'm
yeah. So
saying
the
he
Queen's
was
husband.
yeah, he was the guy though, and
Yeah,
the his
but
wife, the queen, I mean, yeah, she was the monarch, but all the expectation was on him.
he understood his job very, very well. His job was not to essentially rule over the Queen, as it were. It was very much to be her support. When he was in public, he would always walk behind her a couple of paces.
Hmm.
Um, when it came to behind closed doors, it was very much his household. He was
Yeah,
he was very, very much in charge of doing things and managing the family side of it,
right,
which obviously would have taken quite a lot of pressure off Her Majesty and allowed her to concentrate on being Queen Elizabeth.
right.
And there was that famous speech that she gave, where she said, he's not very good at accepting praise, but he has been, was it my stay? She called him my stead and stay throughout these years, I think, or something. I can't remember the quote verbatim,
Yeah.
but that was kind of his job,
Hmm.
was to be her support network,
Yeah.
and possibly,
As
he
far as I
was
know, he did a good job with that.
he, he was did an incredible job with it.
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
I'm sure there were moments behind closed doors when maybe things weren't going so well with the monarchy, and the public opinion perhaps wasn't what it became,
Hmm.
because public opinion on figures ebbs and flows.
Hmm.
I'm sure there was a point up until Joe Biden got into the Oval Office where Joe Biden was very highly thought of. Same with
Yeah.
Clinton and Kennedy and Trump and
Yeah.
every US president has ever been would have had ebbs and flows,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm.
And I'm quite sure during those darker times he was probably outspoken privately.
Yeah. And again, that's where most of that came from. But,
Mm,
that was just, again, there was no other way,
no,
especially for somebody like him.
yeah,
As you say, he actually wasn't the king.
mm,
He wasn't the hereditary heir to the throne.
no,
No, but like I said, when it came to how people, at least outside of Britain, thought of him, you know, what they thought he was like, and what influence he had on Elizabeth, young Elizabeth.
mm,
Um, you know, as you say, they thought he was you know, I don't know what, hardhead,
mm,
you know, and from everything I saw, maybe my, view is shaded because of where I am, but yeah, he kind of was. But my question is, so what?
he he was a hard head, but then he was a hard head because he had seen action during the Second World War, and
Right?
in the Royal Navy,
Hmm.
and that kind of does things to people, finding yourself in that position.
Yeah, yeah. It makes decisions a little more heavy,
Mm,
just in general.
yeah,
I can relate to that. It's like after surviving and navigating really dire circumstances, it's like you just don't take things lightly, right?
no,
And you don't oh it's harder to consider, I guess, I don't want to say the next guy, but some of the next guys,
Mm,
you know, that they just don't, it just doesn't feel like it matters that much. And that's
mm,
probably just the way he felt. And that's probably, something uh, that his daughter, you know, picked up from him,
mm.
was that I'm going to be the queen. And, so, some of the things I'm going to make decisions on are really going to matter, and
Mm.
I can't just listen to everybody. Right.
Yeah,
I can't just agree with everybody because not everybody is going to agree with each other. It's just the way it is.
yeah,
And but I better, whatever decision I make, it better be the right one. And like I said, that was the vibe that I got from him, especially, his work for internal policy change.
mm,
That's why those program like the one you mentioned, that's why it exists.
yeah,
It's like people like that just don't just do things, because they want to be a good guy,
mm,
right? I mean, yeah, they probably want to be a good guy, whatever, but or maybe don't care at all, but they want to do the right thing, because they've seen what happens when people do the wrong thing.
yeah,
And one thing that really, hallmarked Elizabeth's time on the throne the whole time, was that she had, like I said, she just got this enormous track record of doing the right thing, whatever it
yeah,
was.
yeah, for the most part, yeah.
You know, I mean, it wasn't 100% perfect. I'm sure she went out with, at least a little twinge of regret here and there, but by and large, you know, even at her own expense and at to the detriment of her, of how some people looked at her, she did what she did.
Mm,
And like I say, that's leadership. Um, that's doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do, and with the understanding of what happens when you don't do the right thing.
yeah,
Even if you don't do the right thing by accident, they will come for you, right?
yeah,
And they won't be happy.
mm,
And like I said, Charles right now, he's just in that situation where he has a shot at, I mean, not just so that, so that he can continue the legacy and so that he can be well remembered, but just because, failing at what he's really kind of going to have to do is going to have dire consequences for everybody.
yeah,
And it's going to have dire consequences, for you all, right? It's Americans don't ever think about the troubles in anywhere in Europe, but especially in the UK, as having an impact on us. It always does.
mm,
It always does. Just like the uh, um, political issues that they have had in Germany after the Second World War. They've had an impact on our economy. They've had an impact on our foreign relations in general. um Hell, even Canada, we had to make this sweetheart deal, uh NAFTA, with them, just because of how they were acting, how they
mm,
were structuring their economy,
mm,
right? Is we're stuck with everybody else too, right?
yeah,
It's, and same with, nobody thinks about the political and economic impact of issues in places like Mexico, or the bigger countries in South America. You know, when they sneeze, sometimes we catch a cold,
mm,
right? And Britain is no exception. And like I said, Charles, um, he just got started. And, it's like one of those things where, hopefully he will end up being the right guy in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm a natural pessimist. It might not turn out that way, you know.
There's always that
Um,
chance.
yeah. And, again, I know it's not going to happen, but my position is, you know, give him every possible opportunity and every possible tool to make sure he is that guy.
Mm.
He's not going to like it. I don't even get the feeling he's all that like excited and thrilled about even being the king.
I think that's
You know, yeah,
being in your 70s and suddenly being given this job. I think,
yeah. I
I,
would,
I
I would resent it if it was me.
yeah,
I say, you want me to do what now?
yeah. Hang on a minute.
Right. I
But
don't,
then he's not, he understands that he has a duty to perform,
yeah,
and that
yeah.
duty is to be the figurehead of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland
Oh,
and
the
its
figurehead,
Commonwealth.
right? The figurehead, and as you say, um, uh, that interconnection underneath all of the politics, economics, and
Mm,
the things that show up on the 6 o'clock news.
mm,
There is other besides that, that is going to be most of his problem.
mm-hmm.
And like I said, as you say, he's in his 70s. He's a widower. His success as a father and a family man is mixed at best.
Yeah,
And besides all that, this is, you guys are in the middle of Brexit. Um, and the global economy is not very cooperative with anybody right now.
no,
In other words, like instability wise and chaos and ricketiness, there's a lot of that.
yeah,
And he just kind of got plumped right down in the middle of it.
yeah, yeah,
I remember people even making a big deal about him, you know, when he was, you know, I guess signing up to be the king, that he was irritated with somebody about how the desk was set up. And I was like, I'd be the same way. I'd be grumpy too, right?
yeah. Yeah, I think that was a mixture of being very, very tired and he was grieving for his mother. And I've said it in the past. Would you want to go through that in the public space?
No, no,
We all know how hard grief is anyway,
yeah,
and none of us would choose to grieve for a loved one, especially a parent
mhm,
or even a child for that matter,
right,
so publicly
right, yeah.
and not be given the time to grieve.
Right. Right. To
I
be, to have to do it in front of Earth, and
mm,
more importantly, to not even be recognized as a member of a normal grieving family that
mm,
just lost, a loved one that had been an icon of that family before most of the people on Earth right now were even born.
yeah,
you know and then to say, okay, so now, we're sorry about all that, Charlie, but by the way, here's what you get to do for a living from now to the end of your days.
yeah, and it starts
That's
like now.
right. That sucks. you know
Yeah,
um
yeah. It,
and you know
People talk about this enormous wealth and everything else, but it's hereditary and all this stuff. Well,
right,
just remember, in order for him to get the job, his mother had to die.
right,
Mm,
yeah. I mean,
not
he had to lose the one steady thing that
mm,
had been with him ever
for
since,
seven.
literally ever since he was born.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, for, for
Yeah.
75 years plus or minus 9 months.
Right. Right.
this
And
person was in his life.
uh, and in fairness, to everyone making him responsible for that, as you said yourself, this is the tradition, you know,
Mm, yes,
this
it is.
is the bulwark, right?
Mm,
I mean, it's been working. Well, it's been working this way since Cromwell, you
yeah,
know,
and
and
before.
before, well, yeah, before it worked, but it was different, you
Mm,
know, and for a different purpose, really.
yeah, yeah.
Now it's this, and it's been this way, and it's the government, the functional organs of the functionary organs of the British government, have always had the common law, and they've always had the Magna Carta, and always had, the commons and lords, right?
Mm,
You know, and all of that responsibility has been, like spread out among them. And the power of the prime minister and the ministries, which is,
hmm
I mean, the prime minister is just the prime, the primary minister, but you guys have a lot of ministers
Yes.
for a country no bigger than you are. You have a lot of them,
hmm
ministers and deputy ministers, and
Yes.
uh, you guys got those.
Yeah. We.
But it's like with all of that, everybody kind of gets to share a little bit of the beating, when things
hmm
go wrong. So it's not that bad. But for the things that Elizabeth had been responsible for, for all of that time. And now that he is responsible for, there is nobody else. No one
Yeah.
is going to say boo, to William if things
Mm,
go bad, right?
mm.
Nobody is going to say boo to, to Harry, right? Certainly not. Um,
I think most people
Again,
would rather Harry just disappear, to be honest,
yeah,
at this point.
just go entirely private.
Mm,
Um, but you know, they'll squawk at Charles all day long. And
yeah.
I'm not talking about just like the press and the public and all that. I mean, like other heads of state, all of those
hmm
ministers, right?
hmm
That they're all got, anytime something on the throne goes wrong, they're all going to come to him and say, Charles, you had one job,
Yeah.
right? And how could you fail? Well, it's not that hard, really.
Yeah.
Especially because you guys are the ones that actually screw everything up.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but you'll notice that in all of her tenure, in her reign, I don't remember really even one time where Elizabeth was, openly critical of her prime ministers
She
that
didn't
I
like
can
that.
recall.
She didn't like Margaret Thatcher. That was well known.
No, but
Um,
I mean, well, of course, maybe I was going to say, there were probably plenty of opportunities where she could have just, stood up and said, Madam Prime Minister, you did it wrong. And I don't think she ever did that.
she wouldn't have done it in public. She gave her
No.
a few private scoldings. You've got to remember, of course, who her first prime minister was. I believe he was the first one,
Oh,
Winston. I believe the
oh, that's
first prime minister.
right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. It
You
was
know,
Churchill.
it it
Uh,
was always going to be downhill from there on in, really,
yeah,
in terms of the quality of prime ministers.
yeah.
Although there were some that would argue, politically speaking, Churchill wasn't that great.
After the war, he struggled to be just a prime minister in
Yeah,
peacetime
yeah,
and
he was a fan.
reconstruction and all of that. But
Yeah,
he was never built for that. He should have gone fishing like,
Mhm.
the day after uh armistice. He should have said, you know what? Thanks everybody. I I did what I came here to do. I'll see you later.
Yeah, yeah. But when it comes to, I mean, for her, even
Mhm.
for an example of leadership under the most extreme pressure and in the most extreme of circumstances, who better to learn from,
I
really?
suppose. Yeah, I mean, for, the again, because this all happens behind closed doors over there,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. Yeah, I guess he would be the guy, you
You
know.
know, the man who had the ear of her father
Mhm.
when
And got you all through the Blitzkrieg,
got yeah
you know.
got us through the Blitz and Battle of Britain and the Battle of the Atlantic and everything else.
Yeah.
Was her father being steadfast in his refusal to move to Canada and everything else.
Hmm.
And and after her father's passing, there's that
Right.
link in the chain, isn't there?
Hmm.
So in her moments of doubt early on in her reign,
Yeah.
reign in inverted commas, who better to turn to and say help
I know, but if it was
than
down, really, if it was down to that, and it kind of was,
mm,
um, it's like, again, for his own sake, he didn't have to be prime minister to be a good mentor to her.
no, but I think it was the only way that he could have been close enough to mentor her.
Well, whose fault is that?
Well, you'd argue it's the fault of the system we've got set up,
There you go.
but unfortunately, it it works. This is the thing.
Mhm. I'm
It
not
it
saying, Dad, I'm not saying it don't work. That's not the point.
no,
It has achieved an equilibrium, and a versatility, that it has worked very hard for, and that it does a good job of maintaining.
yeah,
That's not the complaint. It's that the foundation upon which it sits, which is basically, like I said, the human race, is beginning to crumble.
hmm
There's nothing wrong with the setup. There really isn't. And to be honest with you, if it if it could be just left alone in isolation, it would probably work indefinitely.
mm,
It would probably just keep going forever. But you all are part of this,
mm,
and that's just the way it is. Too bad, so sad. But like I said, it's um, like even Elizabeth and um, and Winston Churchill, like by contrast with Margaret Thatcher. You
mm,
know, I mean, sometimes I thought Margaret Thatcher apparently styled herself some kind of latter day female Winston Churchill, but I mean, she just wasn't that kind of person. And again, she just was the way she was,
yeah.
right?
See,
And even so, I don't remember, like, and I compare it with how things go over here,
mm,
where everything is kind of on, public display in this really, sordid manner.
yeah,
And I'm sure there were a lot of, like commentary back and forth between them in private, but she
mm.
didn't ever say anything about him in public, or about her in public
I
much.
I think there might have been one or two occasions where she did let fly in public, but
I know, but again, well, she didn't, call for, uh, and I don't even remember. I have a vague remembrance of a few economic policy decisions,
mm,
that Thatcher had made, that I remember Elizabeth not being happy with,
yeah,
in her Elizabethan way. But it's like she never called for it to be struck down or countermanded. We do
no,
that over here all the time,
no.
you
Um,
know.
I think that again is cultural. We would see that as being vulgar.
Yes, you would. And again, that's a limitation of leaning on tradition. It might have been vulgar, I suppose,
Yeah,
but would it have been wrong?
mm,
See? Says,
If would
we're talking about politics here. Most of it is, ugly and disgusting and kind of repugnant, but it's all we have.
yeah, the thing is, would it be wrong to you or wrong
No,
to us?
yeah, I was going to say that's probably relative to the culture because it wouldn't be wrong to me because we just see it every day. You
Yeah,
know, I mean, uh,
I I think to
like
see,
Cruz will, stand up and make us, a fool of himself on the floor, and then Biden will call him a jackass, right?
yeah.
And Cruz will say, "Well, screw you." But we do all that right in front. Here, they do it all right in front of the camera.
Have you ever
Over there,
seen
you guys don't really do that.
Have you seen PMQs, Prime Minister's questions?
Have I seen what?
Prime Minister's questions.
No, no.
Do yourself a favor, pull some up on YouTube, and I'll tell you for why. Did you read David Shackleton's email?
Yeah, yeah,
Right,
yeah,
that was the most eloquent fuck off I've ever read in my life.
yeah,
And because of David's occupational background with being an author,
right.
I kind of expect him to
Yeah,
be like that.
right, right.
So yeah, if you want to go and hear some eloquent f offs, go and listen to Prime
Yeah.
Minister's questions.
That's another again tradition, kind of a grand tradition, is your governments. Well, I use plural because they change hands because of people die and whatever or get
Yeah,
voted out. Um, and uh, your uh, monarchs, and a lot of the time, your ministers and your bureaucrats, it's like they seem to spend a lot of time figuring out, an artful and lovely way of telling people to fuck off,
yeah.
and we don't really do that over here. I mean,
No, you just say fuck off.
yeah, I mean, over there is I remember reading like two paragraphs of some communique between one bureaucrat, between a bureaucrat and a minister. I don't even remember what it was about, but really what it came out to was, screw you, I quit.
Yeah.
It was a resignation over some dispute, you
Mm,
know, and he was like, I I quit, screw
yeah.
you.
Yeah.
But it was like at least a good paragraph and a half, that was really just that. And the
Yeah.
rest of the second paragraph was basically, the specifics of his, you know, retirement.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, screw you, I quit. And here's what I get for quitting. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, it's a little more succinct over here. Hey,
Yes.
something. I don't know if you have any final thoughts. I don't think I do, but we've been at this for hours now, and I've
Yeah.
got some errands to run. But
Yeah.
anyway, thank you so much. And
No worries.
I love Britain, and I love the crown, and you guys are the best. You're the last best hope for the future of humanity. And I'm very sorry to bring you that news.
Not. It's like not again. For God's sake, we've already done this a couple of times.
I told
Can't
you
we
this
just
is,
leave us alone?
it will be you. The bad news is it will be you, and the worst news is it might also be us. Sorry.
Oh, oh, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Oh,
This is where the 12-year-old from the back of the plane, runs up to the cockpit and tries to land it because the pilot and co-pilot are dead.
yeah. Yeah. Bugger that for a game of soldiers.
Yep.
Oh,
All right. You
dear,
have
dear me.
a terrific week.
I shall try.
And, all right. Hopefully next week we can be joined by the tall lady. Maybe we'll talk about something a little less esoteric than this. But
Yeah. Yeah.
thank you so much.
And you, sir. And you.
All right, and talk to you again in a week.
Yep. Speak later on, mate.
Yeah.